Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next video podcast. I'm really excited to have Andrew Pope, who is one of our Dear Thrive advisors, on today. Now, he's got a great title, a digital productivity advisor and a modern work consultant.
For sure. No, thank you, Amanda. Yes, it is an interesting title, and it's the kind of job that I can't explain to my parents. But digital productivity is probably the best way of putting it. It's really around helping people with how their behaviors and their use of the technology can both combine to improve how we work. So a lot of it is around improving collaboration and also our understanding of how we can leverage the technology to meet our own needs. So whether it's as a team or an organization, but just having a better grasp of the collaboration tools we have and the basic behaviors that we need to exhibit to get the most out of them.
Yeah, amazing. Now, maybe before we dive into the what you do and how you support businesses, and you've worked with some great businesses as well. I'd love you to touch on some of the people that you've worked with. Maybe start with your background. Where did you start, and then how did you get into the work that you're doing now?
Great question. It's been a bit of a journey. I used to be an environmental scientist back in the day when I started out from university, and it was really that journey through workplaces. So going from being a scientist in the field to then being a project manager and client manager, and starting to move through corporate roles. Eventually, I took on an IT project around a SharePoint rollout and moved totally away from my work as an environmental consultant and more into technology and enterprise programs, and that's where I combined, I guess, my experience of being at the receiving end, where I'm trying to deliver work and work for clients, and actually try and do something, and all the frustrations of when the technology doesn't really do what I need to do, or the culture doesn't really exist to help make us really thrive as a team. So that's where it all came about. And eventually I took the plunge. And after my last corporate role as innovation manager, I was like, okay, I'm done. I want to go do this by myself and, do it externally. And, I guess sort of offer my unique perspective, bringing the technology and the practices and processes together. And so I've been doing it now as a consultant for designing collaboration, my own business for around 8 or 9 years now.
Amazing. So, given that we are continuing to work in hybrid and remote working environments, maybe with some of the clients that you have helped, give us some ideas about the challenges that they've come to you with.
The challenges vary quite a bit. I mean, the first really, I guess, relevant one for where we are now, I was doing some work for a UK government department. This was 2020 when something significant happened and shifted how we work. And the program was originally going to be around communities and knowledge management and sort of knowledge sharing programs. And then when the world went into lockdown, we very quickly shifted to what is it where we actually, what's the priority? And it suddenly became apparent it was around this new dawning way of work. I think that the department I was with, they were very aware of hybrid coming down the track. And how could we prepare for that? How could we actually start to optimize a mix of remote and office working and help people discover the behaviors, how they can better use the tools? So there's a lot of work around teams. Everyone was on that rapid learning curve, but more moving from beyond that, from beyond the sort of meetings and just trying to maintain work to what's next. How can we actually really build a sense of a coordinated team that's able to work anywhere and not necessarily always be working at the same time and bringing in some asynchronous behaviors. So that was probably the first key project that sort of really is looking at what we see today in hybrid work. And evolved a little bit these days. I'm more working around sort of leadership behaviors and helping leaders with the skills they need to be able to lead, whether it's a distributed team or engage a workforce across the virtual technology that they're using. So the sort of the behaviors around getting people feeling safe and comfortable in digital technology, but also how they can communicate and collaborate effectively with their teams.
That's so interesting. So you started out looking at process and tools and getting used to people in this environment through to now human behaviors and leadership, which I find really interesting. And so, what are the things that you're seeing with how people are reacting to get sort of the most productive and efficiencies, out of their teams?
Yeah.
I wonder how things have changed over the years and what you're seeing now.
I mean, a lot has changed. I mean, my approach is generally to guide people through what they can do. So I'm not necessarily always going to say this is what you need to do with your team, because there's a lot of established norms that are going to be there, and each team is different. So it's really a case of helping them develop ways of work that work for them. So some of them might be really able to embrace fully asynchronous working. For some of them, it might be around just taking some first steps to being a little bit more confident in using digital technology in slightly better ways, whether it's changing how we run meetings or the behaviors of leaders to encourage people to be more visible in meetings, things like that. So it's very nuanced, but we're, I think, at this sort of tipping point where we've been working in this hybrid way for a while, and there's this sense of something needs to shift, that we're not really doing so well with this, well, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or
Mm,
whatever it is. There's a lack of focus on what does the team need, what do the individuals need, how can we actually work better as a team for our customers, for our organization. So a lot of it is really going back to basics. What is it we actually do? What is it that's holding us up? How can we do this better? And once we sort of take that step back, that's where I think teams, organizations, leaders really suddenly go, oh, this is why we're doing it. This is how we can use the technology. There's a sort of a bit of an aha moment, because we've now discovered the problem that we're trying to solve, rather than we're just going to try and use technology better, or we're trying to just de- develop something as a team. It's once we've discovered that why, and it's quite often very similar reasons that we need to do this, whether they're it's a struggle to coordinate and align working when we're maybe in different places at different times, around decision making, that how can we actually improve visibility of our work to help us be faster or more effective at making decisions, or around well-being, that we're struggling with a lack of focus time and sort of the relentless demand of collaboration, where we're using too many tools and we're not entirely sure where we need to be physically and digitally. And that's a big onslaught, and we're struggling for time, and also just struggling to be able to prioritize what work is important, what notifications are the ones that I do need to worry about, what are the ones that maybe are less important. So quite a lot around that, which again it's the interface of technology and behaviors, because we don't necessarily understand the best use for the tools, but also we're maybe not using it in the best ways, where we're perhaps sending chat messages when we really shouldn't be, because this is causing quite a big distraction.
I'm keen to touch on two things, maybe a couple of examples. One, probably more emotionally driven, and then you mentioned the tools as well. So the first one being, if you're in an organization and you're a leader, part of a team, I think what you were alluding to before was almost thriving, right? People are
Yep,
just
absolutely.
doing Zoom after Zoom or whatever it is, and they're just probably not living their best selves at work. So how would you guide the teams to be able to think not only about the work that needs to be done and the efficiencies, but what are the sort of cultural norms? How do they actually lift up the teams to be, happier and healthier?
Mm. Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the aim, right? Is that we
Mm.
are happier, healthier, and more engaged as well in what we're doing. And really, this is down to the team to agree on this. It's for the team to agree what are the expectations that we all aspire to in work. So a lot of the problems come down to the fact that there's been no conversation. There is no expectation on what is a way of work that we as a team want to do. And without those expectations, we tend to assume the worst. We tend to assume we have to be always available, or we break down trust, and there's a bit of a disconnect between then what we think we should be doing and what we want to be doing, and there's a tendency to maybe not be honest about our working day, that maybe if we need a couple of hours to go and do something, we're not necessarily going to say I'm not available for this time. Whereas actually, if you have that culture of trust and we're able to say, yeah, won't be starting until 10 because I've got to do this, but please, contact me after this, or if it's really urgent, give me a call. It's just setting these expectations clearly that these things are okay, and putting in some boundaries around what is work time that's focused work, what is personal time, and what is time when we're open to collaboration and to be contacted by our colleagues. And otherwise, it becomes very, very messy. And the other thing I think that we don't really agree on very well is the tools that we're going to use to do this work. So, for example, we might be, let's say we're coordinating work. There's so many different tools to do that in, and we typically use all of them. So we'll have meetings, we'll send emails, we'll be in chat conversations and channel messages, and maybe we'll be using visual task boards like Trello and Planner. And it's just the sheer volume of all these tools that we're using for similar purposes that also can really hold us back and really impact on our focus time, and even our own personal time after hours.
So you mentioned the tools. Can we get specific now on your favorite productivity tools? Yeah, you just get absolutely fatigued with the choice that you've got.
Yeah.
What's the right combination to use?
Yes, it's a tough question. I I don't know if there is one that's better than the other. I mean, different companies have. I mean, everyone's got. Yeah, most organizations are on Microsoft 365. Some aren't. And whatever anyone's got is usually going to be good enough. It's just knowing how to use the technology well. So, I mean, I am quite. I'm a reasonable fan of Teams. I know a lot of people don't like Teams, but the problem is we don't really use it very well. So it's used for typically meetings and chat, and we don't really use the channel component there very well, where channels is where we can have messages and content and some more contextual work delivered there, but the uptake of channels is very, very, very low. When it's used well, Teams is actually a very powerful productivity tool, because you can also turn a message into a task. You can have the conversations in a place that's aligned to whatever it is we're doing. You have a channel named by, say, a stage of work or a deliverable. It's very easy to organize your work quite nicely and cleanly in Teams. But that's if we're using it well. The problem is we don't tend to use the technology very well. So productivity is hard, because we are maybe using our own personal tools perhaps for tracking tasks, or writing them down on a piece of paper or whatever it is. There's not an alignment with everybody else around how can we actually share this, and whether it's we all decide to use Planner for what the team is doing, or whether we have an asynchronous stand-up each week, where instead of having a meeting, we just put in into a Teams channel what we're working on, and what are our barriers, what are the people, who are the people we're talking to this week, what are the issues we're facing. I guess it comes down to visibility. It's like having like one simple place where work is visible to our team and also to us, that we can see what our team is working on, and able to understand at a glance what's going on, rather than having to rely on ad hoc messages and too many meetings and too many sort of other tools to try and get a picture of what's going on, because it's all quite piecemeal.
I love how you said the term visibility, and I completely agree with you that if you have work that everyone can see and everyone is aligned to, it does make things a lot more efficient. But I'm curious as to whether you've seen some examples of people who have done that well, and what's kind of happened.
Yes, I mean, so I have, and I mean, it comes really. There's two areas that we can focus on. One is that team working visibility, the stuff that we're doing within our team that's to the benefit of our team, and then there's visibility to other people in our organization of what we're doing that might be in a community or some other network where there's an opportunity to build our expertise, or to ask for help from people outside of our team. So there's two areas of that, and yeah, so I mean, this is where it's done well. It really comes down to leadership.
Mhm.
It's down to individual leaders who make the spaces safe and purposeful for people to then be visible in what they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, it pretty much the leaders need to sort of deliver by example. So they need to be talking about what they're doing, but also the style needs to be right. It's not in a style where we're talking about reports and data and information. It's actually, as a human, what am I doing? What are the things that I'm struggling with? Whether this is with the team or whether this is in a community. It's the individual actions and the style of a leader that really makes these places feel safe. Other actions of leaders that can help is by listening as well. So being active listeners in teams and in play tools like Viva Engage, the sort of community tools. So responding to the posts of people that are in their teams or in their organizations. And that is incredibly empowering. There's some great use cases in Swoop Analytics do benchmarking of Viva Engage and of communities and top performing communities. And every single one of those, it really comes down to the specific actions of leaders and community managers who make these spaces safe and yeah, empower their people to have a say as well.
Mm. And I suppose with the recent rollout of the right to disconnect legislation, I mean, you're so right. Leadership scenario sets the culture for the organization and, the right sort of balance of things being okay and not. And I wonder what your advice is for leaders to best support that legislation.
I can see why it can be a little bit worrying because how many times do we need to contact someone when when the shit hits the fan and something needs to be done? We need some help. It's we all have to sometimes make that dreaded call or receive that dreaded call out of hours, and that's not going to go away. But I think what we can do is understand how we can help just to not overdo it on the everyday stuff, on the unnecessary communication when it's not urgent. And again, a lot of this comes back to helping a team define what it is, how we want to communicate, how we want to collaborate, how we can set boundaries, and just making it okay that when we do finish work, that is okay to switch off. That that we don't expect people to still be available at 6 p.m. Unless something really is required. That sort of default expectation of being always on needs to be just articulated that we don't expect that. And I think there's a lot of simple things around just the language we use and how we convey that we respect time. I mean, in terms of specific actions, there's things that leaders can do that are quite simple. Like instead of sending that email at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening, they can simply schedule it to arrive into the recipient's inbox 9 o'clock the next morning. So that email isn't arriving on a Sunday night, and we're all tempted to do that when the boss sends us a message on a Sunday evening and say, well, it's the boss, maybe I better reply. It looks good. It's whether we need to or not, whether they're expecting us to reply or not, we
Mm.
still sometimes feel that we ought to because we feel it's the right thing to do. Whereas if we don't receive that message, then there's no temptation. So there's simple things like that. But I mean, going back to what I was talking about transparency before, if we do have a bit more transparency in how we work, where the activities we're working on that are actually visible in team working tools, it's less likely that we're going to need to be contacted out of hours because a lot of that information, that knowledge is already there. It's not hidden away in our C drive. It's not a series of post-it notes that are stuck on a wall somewhere. It's there in the right place that can be found. So that can
Mm.
definitely help. But that's quite a jump to get from I guess traditional practices to more visible practices. But you know, encouraging people to be more visible in what they do, in maybe having meetings asynchronously where we can actually write up what we're doing rather than talking about it, means that there's a record of these things. And
Mm.
there's it's sort of getting into the culture of being a bit more open and honest.
It's a really tough one because I reflect on the times that I've worked for global organizations, and it's there are different expectations when you're dealing with remote workers, different time zones, different leadership across the globe as well. And I think the nervousness that you have to respond is one thing,
Yeah.
but then just the constant expectation that maybe just need to have a look. And I like the thought that you've sort of said a planner that's visible for everyone, where your boss can start to populate, or what have you. If you've got your notifications right, fantastic.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
It's a bit of a struggle because it isn't quite one size fits all. However, I like the intention that that leadership has to set the tone here, and that we have to be transparent around the right practices. I know my practice. I'm always going to be pinging things at 8 o'clock or midnight if my kids are in bed. But
yeah.
that's my practice. How do I not make that same expectation of my employees, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about empowering our employees to be able to say no, or to switch off, to actually be safe, to protect their own time. And as you say, it's nuanced. Every team is different, and some teams need to work in unusual hours because of the nature of maybe working with global colleagues. But then, if that's the case, then there's other times in the day that we can say, well, okay, I'm working late, so this morning, please don't bother me. And it's being safe to be able to have these conversations, and being safe to say, yep, I'm going to be doing something myself. Please try not to bother me between sort of 9 and 11 this morning, and respecting that. But that happens when teams are empowered to do this, and that comes through their leaders having conversations and saying, well, how can we do this? How can I help you to protect your time? And what are the things we can do to support this? Because the thing is, the burden of a leader now is massive, because they've got to deal with this, they've got to deal with AI, they've got to be able to try and communicate and collaborate across multiple tools. There's so much additional stuff as well as just doing their job.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of delegating a lot of this and just saying, well, help me. Let the team figure this out. What are the ways of work that we can implement, and get the input of everybody, rather than just like, this is how it's going to be. Because I feel that when people have different preferences, listening to what individuals need. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be respected all the time, but at least giving them an opportunity to say, yeah, this is how I feel about it, and helping to create at least some expectations and some certainty in ways of work. I mean, the other example I come up with is, you think about a new starter joining a team. How long does it take for a new starter to pick up all the sort of the unwritten rules and norms of how they need to work? It can be months before they really get a sense of what are those kind of rituals and practices of a team. If we can write those up, if we can just jot them down, what are these rituals, these practices, these ways of work? This is a great start. And maybe some of them are out of date, and perhaps we need to change them. But just trying to articulate, what is it we do? Why do we do it in these certain ways? Could there be a better way? I mean, there invariably is, but until we have that conversation, we tend to just repeat old habits.
Is there any ritual that you've seen from the teams that you've been exposed to that has surprised you, or that you would love to adopt?
Yeah, there's some fabulous ones. I mean, I think that there's quite a thing. I mean, I've done quite a lot of work with some European manufacturing and industrial companies, and sort of in the knowledge worker side, there's quite a culture of virtual coffees. So with these distributed teams, they will have a virtual coffee once a week, which is purely a just getting to know your colleagues kind of activity. And they're incredibly popular and very, very well attended. And I know we've been talking about how we can save time, and this is obviously another meeting, but these kind of conversations are really powerful for building relationships, and actually creating a bit of a team culture and a ritual around this. So things like that are incredibly powerful. I mean, it's really hard to get a sense of what people are doing when all you're getting is just a one-line update of what you're working on, or if you're lucky, they might join a meeting. There's a big issue around a lack of connection with our colleagues, and I've read some research that a lack of connection with people at work is the number one cited reason for just a lack of well-being at work,
Mm.
because we're not getting, whether it's the support, like the professional support or the emotional support. Having a connection with our colleagues is so important. So rituals that help to reinforce that sort of thing are really, really important. And thinking about what was it that we did in the office that really created a sort of team dynamic. How can we continue this? And whether it's in the office or not, these rituals are really, really powerful.
It's so true. I mean, we all want to work with good humans at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think the connections that we forge, and they used to say it was the cooler conversation,
Mm,
whatever that was.
yeah.
It's the rewiring your brain just to not think about the immediate work practices. Is how do I actually get to understand the people that I'm working with? How
Yeah.
do I actually think about different ways of working with fresh thinking
Yeah.
and new perspectives, right? So I
Absolutely.
love that. Such a fan of the virtual chats as well. I think we used to call it donut chats.
Donut chat's nice.
Now
Because who
I
doesn't love a
wonder.
donut?
How so if you think about our Dear Thrive community, how are you best to support the community and individuals in it?
I'm very passionate about helping either leaders to be able to have a little bit more digital maturity so they can be confident to be able to lead distributed or hybrid teams, but also where I feel that there's more that we can do to help empower our teams to make decisions around how they work, and to take advantage of the technology. So, I mean, the best thing is, I mean, we don't always want to talk about problems, but the first thing to start with is always like, what can we improve? What is it that we can do as a team, as an organization, or as an individual that can be improved? Because there's the technology is there to help us, but if we don't really know what it is we're trying to do, we're
Mm,
not necessarily going to get very far. So, I think the first step is just to really help people understand what can we improve. And quite often it's just simple things. We're not trying to always change the world. It's just what simple habits, behaviors, or ways of work will help us to get to the next level, whether it's around personal development, as a leader, or team development, team performance, or organizational delivery around a project or an operational objective. And this is where I feel I can really, really help by taking people through a journey of, let's find something to improve, and let's find how the technology and how some habits and behaviors will really help get there and thrive as a hybrid virtual digital office, wherever we are. It doesn't really matter, but just helping us connect and boost our productivity and well-being.
awesome. And what does thriving in work life mean to you, Andrew?
For me personally,
Mm,
well, I love just to be able to be, I guess, in control of my day, so that I've got time that's not work, that's my own time, that I can just go and enjoy it and get out my bike or go for a run and just get outside and get that sense of me time. And then knowing that I've got my structured time, and that doesn't always happen. There's always spontaneous things that come in and distract and disrupt my day. But just having that sense of like, there's me time, there's work time, and I know I'm goal driven, so I can get the things done when they need to be done, and being able to step away when it's the right time to do so, and actually think about the things that I'm doing rather than sitting at the computer and sort of getting nowhere. So I feel that's what thriving for me is. And if that involves going and doing a school run once a day, and having that time that's set aside for that, brilliant. And then back to it. If I do still a fair bit of work in Europe, so having late meetings is fairly normal. But then that's great because I've got all this other time in the day which I can spend with the kids, or you know enjoy my coffee. I think that's probably the one thing: enjoying my coffee, just in
I
peace.
I
No one.
love it. And I think it's a real skill to actually step away and not
Yes,
continue to ruminate on things when you do step away. So
absolutely.
I'd love to grab that from you.
Oh, I mean, it's taken me a while to get there, to actually feel that, like, sometimes, just stop. You're not going to achieve something by just staying at the computer, even though I feel like, well, I need to. When when I wasn't getting so much work in, and I was, struggling a bit, and there's this expectation I gave myself that I should just be at the computer, I should be doing stuff, I should be going out. And sometimes you think, you know what, just step away. Just if you're not really sure why you're doing what you're doing, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And that's always something that I've got to be just conscious of.
Great advice. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you
Oh,
for
no worries.
your insights and your time. I love your title, and I'm sure you can help plenty of people. Look forward to connecting you to our Dear Thrive community.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Andrew.